got it. Okay, this meeting is being live streamed. Wonderful. And I consent to be to the got it. Meeting is now streamed live on custom live streaming service. Haribo. Get rid of that if we can. Don't get that. It disappears on its own accord. Wow. Hare Krishna. So I need to overcome the dualities of the modes of material nature and progress with some Srimad Bhagavatam through all this stuff. So it's a great opportunity. Let us go then to Srimad Bhagavatam. We're going to the 4th canto. We're going to the 22nd chapter, and we're going to the 25th verse. And we'll begin. Harer Mohus Tat Parakarna Pura. See, it gets me so disturbed, all this stuff. I haven't even chanted Hare Krishna for this opening of Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Now we'll try to begin. Canto 4, Chapter 22, text number 25. Harer Mohus Tat Parakarna Pura Guna Bidanena Vijrimbamanaya Bhaktya Yasangha Sad Asatyanantmani Syanir Gune Brahmani Chanjasarati. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The devotee should gradually increase the culture of devotional service by constant hearing of the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These pastimes are like ornamental decorations on the ears of devotees. By rendering devotional service and transcending the material qualities, one can easily be fixed in transcendence in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada's purport. This verse is especially mentioned to substantiate the devotional process of hearing the subject matter. A devotee does not like to hear anything other than subjects dealing with spiritual activities or the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I'll say that once more. A devotee does not like to hear anything other than subjects dealing with spiritual activities or the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's a word that comes to my mind as qualifiers. So the qualifier of this sentence that Srila Prabhupada just made, the devotee doesn't like to hear anything other than subjects dealing with spiritual activities. So it's even qualified further by the statement, or the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Very precise, very concise. Yeah, not just into spiritual activities, subjects dealing with spiritual activities, which are varied, and maybe that's what Srila Prabhupada will continue mentioning. But specifically the pastimes are those things connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We can increase our propensity for devotional service by hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from realized souls. The more we hear from realized souls, the more we make advancement in our devotional life. The more we advance in devotional life, the more we become detached from the material world. The more we become detached from the material world, as advised by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the more we increase in attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, a devotee who actually wants to make progress in devotional service and go back home, back to Godhead, must lose interest in sense enjoyment and associating with persons who are after money and sense gratification. This is the advice of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Niskinchanasya Bhagavad Bhajanon Mukhasya Param Param Jighamishor Bhavasagarasya Sandharshanam Vishayinam Atayushitam Cha Hanta Hanta Visha Bhakshanatop Yashadhu from the Chaitanya. Mangled that, but please forgive me. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya-lila 11:8. The word Brahmani used in this verse is commented upon by the impersonalists or professional reciters of Bhagavatam, who are mainly advocates of the caste system by demonic birthright. They say that Brahmani means the impersonal Brahman, but they cannot conclude this with reference to the context of the words bhakya and guna bidhanina. According to the impersonalists, there are no transcendental qualities in the impersonal Brahman. Therefore, we should understand that Brahmani means in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I'm just going to go back slightly. Again, please forgive me. But the impersonalist is saying, but the impersonalists, cannot conclude this with reference to the context of the words bhakya and gunadi bihanena. According to the impersonalists, that is, there are no transcendental qualities in the impersonal Brahman. That's their understanding. Therefore, we should understand that Brahmani means in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead as admitted by Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, wherever the word Brahma is used, we must refer to Krishna, not to the impersonal Brahman effulgence. Brahmati Paramatmati Bhagavanati Sabjate, Bhagavatam 1-11. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan can all be taken in total as Brahman, but when there is reference to the word bhakti or remembrance of the transcendental qualities, this indicates the Supreme Personality of Godhead, not the impersonal Brahman. Om Magana Timarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Minopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Bandiham Sri Guru Sri Yata Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sa Advaitam Sa Avadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanshana Gourangi Radhe Brindavanishwari Brishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpataribhascha Kripasindabevacha Patitanam Pavenibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we find that the Vaishnavas are very busy in culturing devotional service, and they're often have to push back against the onslaught of materialism and the onslaught of materialism in the form of impersonalism and voidism. We offer our humble obeisances to Srila Prabhupada by saying that he's delivering the Western countries which are filled with impersonalism and voidism. And the result of such impersonal concepts of spirituality is the increase of materialism, because there's no ultimate goal to help us come to the platform of devotional service. So Srila Prabhupada is relentlessly having to push back against these materialistic concepts. And that is the work of the Vaishnavas on all fronts, the battle against Maya. So the beginning of the translation, the devotee should gradually increase the culture of devotional service by constant hearing of the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is our business. And it then goes on to say, these pastimes are like ornamental decorations on the ears of devotees. By rendering devotional service and transcending the material qualities, one can easily be fixed in transcendence in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that verse that Prabhupada quotes from the first canto Srimad Bhagavatam, Brahmati Paramatmati Bhagavanati Subjecte. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth realize this non-dual substance, or Brahman, this non-material substance, in three phases we understand. As Brahman, the all-pervasive energy of the Lord, as localized Paramatma, Supersoul, directing the wanderings of all living entities, and as Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Bhagavatam says that one must search for it up to this in all circumstances. In the seed verses of the Bhagavatam, it says that one should search etavadeva jignasa tattva jignasanatmana anvayad vitari kyabyam yatshat sarvatra sarvata. A person who is searching after the supreme absolute truth, this is from 2.936, that absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, must certainly search for it up to this in all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly and indirectly. So this is Lord Krishna instructing Brahma. And Krishna has already said that it is I who existed before the creation when there was nothing but myself. What you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. Then he goes on to say, Ritaritam yat pratiyata, etc. He says, O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality. So again, even this is very interesting, because Krishna is saying that if you don't take the connection, it may appear to have value, but if it is without relation to me, has no reality, nor is my illusory energy. So even the Sunyavad and Nirviseshvad, that is a type of illusion, that there is no personality of Godhead. So it's a type of covered atheism. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that the Buddhists, they present the Sunya, there is no God. And I remember once going to a presentation where Buddhists were speaking, and we were speaking on behalf of Krishna consciousness, and another person was speaking too. And the first thing out of the Buddhist mouth, it says, first of all, we are not a religion, we don't believe in God. So they're to be commended for that in one sense, because it's not covered. They're blatant about it, and they say there's no God, there's nothing. So this is the Sunyavad. But the Nirviseshvad, the idea of the impersonal, if it's overemphasized, that aspect of the Supreme, then it is a great offense to the personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed this out very vehemently in his teachings, that this is an insult to the Supreme Lord. Yes, our Supreme Lord has these multifarious potencies where he pervades everything in his impersonal feature. He then is present as the supersoul within every living being's heart and directs the wanderings of all the living entities. How amazing is that? And And these are mentioned by Rupa Goswami, that one has to, if one wants to understand the absolute truth in totality, then he must embrace the idea that the Lord, our Lord, has inconceivable potency, so that even though he is distributed throughout the creation in his different features as Brahman and Paramatma, he remains that complete truth. And that is indicated, that we know in the Shirsh Upanishad, that so many things are coming from the Lord and they're complete in themselves, but he remains the complete balance, even though so many universes are emanating from him. So this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and this is what we have to search for. Even though the Mayavad school points to the Bhakti cult as being for the sentimentalists, for the woman class and the Shudras and so on. This is too easy. They say like that because they're performing great austerities and very, again, meritorious in many ways. But the Bhagavatam says that unless they can get shelter at the lotus feet, if they cannot develop that attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord, there's no ultimate shelter. And therefore, even after their imagined liberation, they again fall into the material activities again, because there's no ultimate shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. So, Prabhupada is pushing back on that in the second half of the purport. They utilize these words, but they don't, the word Brahmani used in this verse is commented upon by the impersonalists or professional reciters of the Bhagavatam. They're mainly advocates of the caste system by demonic birthright. It's another whole subject. They say that Brahmani means the impersonal Brahman, but they cannot conclude this with reference to the context of the words Bhakcha and Gunad Bi Tadhena. So this is there in Hare Manus, the Supreme Person, Hare Tatpara Karna Pura, in relation with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then, where do we go? Translate code. Yeah, so Srila Prabhupada recites it all very clearly connecting to Krishna. Bhakcha, the word bhakcha is there. By devotion. To have devotion, one has to be able to offer devotion to someone. So someone just going and coming, I think, maybe. So I was just looking back slightly because I think it was in text number 20, this whole idea of the decoration of the personality of Godhead was nicely encapsulated in that famous verse. It says, Satam prasangam mama virya samvido bhavanti rit karna rasayana kata tachjoshanat asva pavargavatmani shradharatir bhaktiranukramishati. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the wonderful pastimes and activities of the personality of Godhead are very pleasing to the ear and satisfying to the heart. So this is the nature of the topics of the Lord, that if one can enter into them, then it's very pleasing to hear about Krishna. And who doesn't like to hear about Krishna? The small cowherd boy playing in the pastures, frolicking with his friends, eating the fruits and playing on his flute, and coming home to please his mother and father after a day of cowherding, looking after the calves and playing all day. And so Krishna is giving pleasure before he leaves. He gives anxiety when he leaves because they're wondering, will he be okay? Will he eat his lunch? Or will he be okay like that? That's the natural parental mood of the Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mai. So they're thinking in that way. And So Krishna's activities are very pleasing to the ear to hear. And they're not just pleasing to hear, but they're satisfying to the heart, because the heart is hankering to experience this wonderful state of existence. We find ourselves in the material world trying to capture the pleasure for which we're always anxious. But we don't know that the pleasure for which we are always anxious is only available when we connect to the source or the reservoir of all pleasure. We're thinking that the reservoir of pleasure is somewhere in the football game, it's in the intoxication, it's in the sexual indulgence, it's in wherever we can find some quote unquote reservoir of pleasure. But the amount of pleasure that's there is very limited, and therefore we find ourselves searching for more. Yes, I want more like that. And then we don't realize that by this rising and setting of the sun, another day passes and is lost. And we don't serve the Lord of the heart, and we keep chasing. And the chasing is, we've given this example many times, you put one carrot in front of the donkey, and the donkey's thinking, I'm pretty close, I can get to the carrot. And so he chases the carrot on and on and on. And he doesn't realize that the situation that's arranged is there so that he will never get the carrot. He can chase for 1,000,000 years. Sorry, just something popped up on the screen as it does. Your internet is unstable. Wonderful. You can see how much I love the medium of technology, but hey, it's what we're using, so stop complaining, Jai. So back to the donkey. He's chasing, and he doesn't realize if he chases for 1,000,000 years, he'll never get that carrot. Guess what? In a similar way, we are chasing the will-o'-the-wisp of material sense gratification, thinking that one day I'll capture this. I'll find that reservoir of pleasure. I'll embrace it. I'll capture it. I'll have it, and it will be mine, and I will live happily ever after. Sorry to burst the bubble for all. It's amazing. It's called Pashati, Na Pashati. Pashati means to see, Na Pashati means don't see. So we see it, but we don't get it. And we keep chasing. Therefore, when we hear about Krishna consciousness, when we hear of higher levels of awareness, we become excited. Why? Because this is connecting to our self-interest. Now, in material consciousness, we have selfish interest. And there's a bit of a difference. It's like milk and curd. You've added a tamarind, or you've added a little bit of citric acid, and it's transformed. So the idea of self-interest is transformed into selfish interest, and therefore we can never find it, because we don't know what our real self-interest is. But when we hear the message of Bhagavatam, when we hear from the devotees of the Lord, when we hear directly from Krishna through those mediums, then we come in contact with our real self-interest. And guess what? We become enthusiastic. We become inspired. We think, yes, this is maybe where I can find the satisfaction. And the more we look, if we look carefully and we look in the proper way, tadviti pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekyanti te jnanam jnaninas tatvedash. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire submissively, render service to those great souls. And those great souls will impart knowledge unto you. Why? Because they're established in that truth. That is their life. And that's the whole process. Ado Shraddha is the beginning. You have a little faith, and then we associate. Then we, Sadhu Sangha, we associate. And by associating with those persons, we get inspiration to take up, what are you doing to make you freed from all this pursuance of material life and to become happy in Krishna consciousness? So we take up the process. So this is our real self-interest. In one sense, it's a very simple process, as I just mentioned that little example there. It's just selfish interest, no result. end is death, repeated birth and death, and the cycle goes on. Tweak it slightly and make it self-interest. Oh, and just by that little flick, as you use technology, it's like a flick of a switch. Tamasi mai jyotirgama. Come out of the darkness and come to the light. Just flick the switch. So when the switch of Krishna consciousness goes on, then we get very satisfied. So that verse that's quoted here, Satam Prasangam Mama Virya Sambit. So in the association of pure devotees, one hears about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's very pleasing to hear, and it's very satisfying to the heart. And by the cultivation of this knowledge, one gradually advances on the path of liberation. So that's what the Bhagavatam says. Bhavantiri Kana Rasayana Kata means it's very pleasing to the ear and to the heart. Tajjoshanat Asu Apavarga. Apavarga, Pavarga means hard work, and Apavarga is liberation from hard work or from the material consciousness. And then Bhagavatam says that Shraddharatir Bhaktir Anukramishati, that faith that we have in the initial stage becomes firm faith, Shraddha, and then Rati. And it says thereafter one becomes fixed. And then real devotion and devotional service begin. Bhaktir Anukramishati, step by step through this process. And Ukrama, Anukramishati. So this process of devotional service starts from the very beginning, but it becomes fixed in Rati. One gains a great taste for that. And Prabhupada said in this verse that he's not interested in anything else. Of a devotee, going back to text 26, text 25, sorry. Prabhupada says, this verse is especially, this verse is especially mentioned to substantiate the devotional process of hearing the subject matter. A devotee does not like to hear anything other than subjects dealing with spiritual activities or the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We can increase our propensity for devotional service by hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from realized souls. The more we hear from realized souls, the more we make advancement in our devotional life. Yes. And then Prabhupada says, the more we advance devotional life, the more we become detached from material world. Sounds like a good idea. The more we become detached from the material world, as advised by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the more we increase in attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, and it goes on, it's everywhere in the Bhagavatam. Therefore, a devotee who actually wants to make progress in devotional service and go back home, back to Godhead, must lose interest in sense enjoyment and associating with persons who are after money and sense gratification. There was a nice little thing, I'll see if it connects. Health, wealth, and time just comes to my mind there. That this idea of sense gratification and money, health, wealth, and time. So we want wealth for sense gratification. We need the time to engage in sense gratification. We want it to continue. And health, you need health. So I think it was Keshava, Swami Bhagavan Keshava Maharaj was saying this. I was listening to him the other day. And if you study our life, this is the way, the will of the wisp, the carrot that the donkey had in front. We want to attain this platform of having wealth and sense gratification. But if we look at our life, it never works out. So at some stages of life in our youth, we have health. Generally, we have health, and we have time, but we don't have wealth. We don't have money. So there's something lacking there. Then in our adult life, we still have health. So yeah, young life, but we don't have we can have wealth. So you might have You might have the health and the wealth, but you're so much striving to get the wealth that there's no time for your happy sense gratification. So, yeah. And then later on in life, you may get the accumulated wealth that you've worked so hard for, and you may have the time, but you don't have the health. So that is the way, the will of the wisp. And Maya's so clever that you want it all, and we foolishly go on in that way. So that is pretty much our existential situation. Whether whatever we may be in this world, these are the things that are going on. And someone may think, oh, no, I'm happy, I'm happy. But actually, the reality is something quite different. Why? Because this is the way we think, that I'm happy, no, I'm okay, I've got enough wealth, I've got enough time, I got like that, one can say. But actually, you're always faced with the difficulties of adi bhautik, adi daivik, and adi atmic kleshas. Kleshas are the miseries of material world. They're always there. The miseries of our own body and mind. Yes, body and mind. And so, I'm not pretty healthy, but actually the reality is something different. We're all suffering difficulties caused by the body in some shape or form, if you have a look at it. And the mind, excuse me, the mind is always disturbed, just like beginning of this class. I'm all over I was sitting calmly. As soon as I started to get into it, problems. So the mind is always going to give some difficulty. Other living entities give us difficulty, knowingly or unknowingly. And material nature, the rain started a little hour ago and some drips were coming through the roof. You got a bucket to put it on, and so it goes on. So this is the material world. And Bhagavatam says that instead of trying to make adjustment, we should tolerate. Wow. These are the simplest verses of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, but they haunt me, and maybe they'll haunt you in different ways, because Tams to teach Matra Sparshas, the simplest of verses, one of the first verses we ever learn, but it's still to be learned on a daily basis. Matra Sparshas to Kunteya Sitoshna Sukha Dukada Agama Paino Nityastam Tiksha Sastva Bharata. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, or skina Bharat Arjuna, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Wow. And it shifts, it changes, because what you were tolerating 2 years ago, it's different. It keeps so endless permutations to be tolerated, as I mentioned, as you go through life. So this is very important in spiritual life, to tolerate. You get what you get. My wife uses that in a classroom. You tell the children, you get a bundle of pencils, for example, in the new entrance to school, 5-year-olds, they come in, and you get a bundle of pencils and you hand them out to the children. Immediately, I want the green one. I want the red one. No, I want the red one. I want the blue. So it goes on. They all want this, and we all have our desires. And we think if we get that blue pencil, red pencil, yellow pencil, whatever, purple pencil, whatever color it may be, then I'll be happy. But the actual fact is quite different. So the mantra to be used in the classroom setting is, you get what you get, don't get upset. And my wife would get them to chant the mantra. You get what you get, you don't get upset. And they practice that. And what happens is, after a little while of that training, then the mind comes under control and they chant that mantra. So instead of getting upset, here's the pencils, take a pencil, and you get what you get, don't get upset. And they get a taste from that. They get a higher taste from using that mantra. So we are learning how to tolerate, and that in the Western side is not very good. Now that's, you have to watch out if you're an Indian body and you've come to the West, because it's a package deal. You get what you get. Don't get upset, because the package deal is that you will learn how to be less tolerant as you assimilate the Western culture. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi in some discussion. It was like, what do you, it was, I think he was asked, what do you, I think it was Gandhi, please correct, I stand to be corrected. But what do you think of Western culture? And the answer was, I think it would be a good idea. It's quite a clever answer. Culture, Western is demonic culture. And it's, you can see that, but it's based in intolerance. We're thinking in a demonic way. I can adjust my situation, whatever it may be, physically, mentally, intellectually, socially, whatever level, I can adjust it. And that way I will achieve happiness. And Bhagavatam and Vedic culture are saying, learn to tolerate because you'll never become satisfied. And just see, this is the sad part. The conditioned life like that, it is so duratma, cripple-minded. We're only thinking, when we think in that way of material adjustment, we're thinking on one short lifetime. That's as far as our imagination can stretch, and we're restricted to thinking in that way. I will become happy in this life because there's no life after this life. There was no life before it. What a miserable outlook, because you cannot check the onslaught of old age, disease, and death. No matter what you do, no matter what you accumulate, your position in this world, you cannot push back the real problem. The real problem of life is janma, mritya, jara, vyadi. These are the real problems of life. And that is the human mission. And Prabhupada in many purports explains, otherwise, if we don't take up the human mission, which is to go beyond this temporary existence, then we are simply a polished version of animal life. We're eating and sleeping and mating and defending, and we present that this is the goal of life. So it's very sad. It's very sad. And Maya is so tricky that it appears the other way. It appears that we're really progressing, focusing on the standard of living, but not the quality of life. Difference. There's a difference. The standard of living is the focus of the material civilization, standard of living, so-called. But the quality of life, and people will testify to that, even materialistic people, the quality of life is degenerating more and more and more and more and more as we chase after the will of the wisp of the standard of living. Wow. So, this is the direction that, and it's beautiful, this part of the Bhagavatam, as we remember, and the Bhagavatam is filled with these different beautiful interactions. Maharaj Prithu's meeting with the Kumaras. So it's such an exalted interaction. Prithu Maharaj is the Shaktavesh avatar. He's actually the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's not proud, and he sees the Kumaras and he relates to them in a very humble way. The Kumaras also appreciate greatly the qualities of Prithu Maharaj, and Prithu Maharaj inquires in a very beautiful way. There's no false ego. Ahankara is missing. It's conspicuous by its absence, and it's very beautiful. So we see that there's just such a sweet interaction. So just going back, we could go back to the whole chapter, but just a couple of verses. Sanat Kumar continued, my dear king, you already have an inclination to glorify the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such attachment is very difficult to achieve, but when one has attained such unflinching faith in the Lord, it automatically cleanses lusty desires from the core of the heart. So Sanat Kumar is saying you have this attraction, and therefore your direction will not be towards materialism, but it's to go further and further towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he continues in text 21, it has been conclusively decided in the scriptures after due consideration that the ultimate goal for the welfare of human society is detachment from the bodily concept of life and increased and steadfast attachment for the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental beyond the modes of material nature. So as I mentioned right at the beginning, I said that there's qualifiers, words or sentences which qualify the original sentence or word that's stated. So we find this all through the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not just attachment. We'll see it. Let me see. Well, human society is detached from the body concept of life and increased and steadfast attachment. So it's not just attachment for the Supreme Lord; it's increased and it's steadfast attachment. So this we see all the time. Attachment, because the whole purpose of this Bhagavatam is to take us as soon as possible to the other side of the cycle of birth and death. That is we don't belong here in this material world. We don't belong in a material body made of earth, water, fire, ether, etc. We belong in the spiritual world where there's eternal blissful existence. And to come to this eternal blissful existence, we have to be engaged constantly. And that we find is there in these teachings of the Kumaras with Prithu Maharaj. We see it as Mother Devahuti is instructed by Kapila Dev, her son. We see it in all the different interactions of how one can come to this, come to this stage. The essence of all advice, Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Instruction, Satam, what is that mean? The essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time in nicely hearing and chanting the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. One should utilize one's full time in this way. So attachment, and going on to where were we? 22, 23. One has to make progress in spiritual life by not associating with persons who are simply interested in sense gratification and making money. Not only such persons, but one who associates with such persons should be avoided. One should mold his life in such a way that he cannot live in peace without drinking the nectar of the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. One can be thus elevated by being disgusted with the taste for sense enjoyment. And then 24, a candidate for spiritual advancement must be non-violent, must follow in the footsteps of the great acharyas, must always remember the nectar of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, must follow the regulative principles without material desire, and while following the regulative principles, should not blaspheme others. A devotee should lead a very simple life and not be disturbed by the duality of opposing elements. He should learn to tolerate them. So I think that's where I picked up this idea of the idea of learning to tolerate and not be disturbed by the duality of opposing elements. So this is a lifetime's work that we've undertaken, the gradual progress of purifying one's existence, coming out of passion and ignorance, coming to goodness, coming to Shuddha Sattva, that we have to do. And don't worry, it's to be expected that one will slip here and there, and to gradually get a strong and firm foothold on this whole process. But if one continues, three key words: start, don't stop. Someone was asked that, what's the advice for pushing on with something that's very important? Start, don't stop. So we have to actually make progress in devotional service. Anukramishati, that's very nice in that. That's the gradual, one gradually advances on the path of liberation, and thereafter one becomes fixed I've mentioned that many times. On the other side of the desert of Anartanavriti, there is a place where one's real devotion and devotional service begins. So that we look forward to, and we can't just look forward to, we have to hear properly how to get there. And how you get there is by always thinking of me. Krishna says, always think of me. He doesn't say think of me from time to time. He says, learn how to always think of me. There's a process, there's a way, there's a practice. Yat karoshi yad yashnasi yad johosi dadasi yat tapashyasi kunti yat tat karushvamadapa. All that you do, not some things that you do, but Krishna says, all that you do, all that you eat, not sometimes, but all the time, all that you offer and give away, plus all austerities you perform should be done to me. Absorb your mind in me constantly. Yeah, always think of me. So it's all the qualifiers are there. Why? Not because Krishna is a megalomaniac. He wants to just meddle in our affairs and control us. No, but he knows that will bring us the happiness. Matchata madgata prana bodhayanta paraspara. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are surrendered to me, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss, enlightening one another and conversing about me. Because that will bring us back to our original constitutional position as servants of the Supreme Lord, and will bring us that Brahma Sokyam, the spiritual happiness, which is transcendental to the fleeting material, phantasmagoric pleasure of the world. And it will continue forever. That is what we're after. So Bhagavatam is giving this instruction, making it very clear. And if we can get that good association, that's so vital. The association, one is to hear from Bhagavatam, and then to gain the association of like-minded persons, and in this way cultivate the process of devotional service. So I'm going to finish there, and if anyone has any reflections, something that's maybe stuck in your mind from what I've been saying and Prabhupada's verses and purports that you might want to share, some reflections, or if someone does have a question, I can attempt to try to answer if you have anything.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Such a beautiful class, elaborating the whole
Krishna Chaitanya.
Yes, Krishna Chaitanya. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, what did you find of interest? What was something you kind of want to reflect? Maybe something, Prabhu?
Yeah, that's
captured.
How you exemplified it, the carrot just in front of the donkey. So our nature is like that. We are running after, but we don't know where is the destination. So the destination is far away. It is always
a great one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really captured. I mean, we've heard that 100 times, that example, but then again, if you hear it, sometimes it makes complete sense. And it was Prabhupada that gave us that example. The poor fellow, he says, the poor fellow doesn't know that no matter how long he chases that carrot, he won't get it. It seems, no, I'm going to catch it because it's just there. But it's always going to be in the same place. Funny, huh? But not funny. It's very sad, because that's our position, isn't it, in the world? The whole world is going on in that way.
Yeah, and that is supported by, wealth, time, and health. So they are all like that. We think we have wealth, we accumulate the wealth. Lot of time is there. So this is not the time to practice devotional service. Lot of time is there. So we keep on accumulating the money. By the time is finished, by the time you accumulate money, you see that your health is not supporting you, and everything got messed. So what is the point of these three things? You need to understand the important, which is important to us. And that's what the lesson is for today. Not the time and health. It can it can go down anytime because
Yes.
in material perspective. So that is not the goal. The goal is different. The goal is
Just
listening.
pause there for 1 second. Thank you. That was I appreciate you bringing reflecting on that. It's an interesting point. I'll just share one little story there that around that point. I think I've shared this before, but it was a long time back. One of my friends, devotee friend, Mahatsa Prabhu, he shared a story. It's a little tragic story, but it just exemplifies what we're talking there. He said that his father had accumulated a reasonably large amount of money, and then he was he's retired, and he was going on a long world cruise. He was going on a big boat, and he was going, and he'd finally come. He wouldn't listen much to Krishna conscious ideas and so on, but he was going on his world cruise after he'd worked so hard in his life. And he told the story. His father went onto the boat, and as he was going, they call it the gangplank, that plank, the stairs. They must have new ways now, but in those days at least, you walked up the stairs to go onto this big liner. And as he walked up the stairs, he had a heart attack and he died just there. So it was such a tragic thing, but it shows we're chasing the carrot up the gangplank, and death comes, and we don't think like that. We think, how I can't die, I have my cruise to go on. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for sharing. Yeah, that is what the life is. We think on that basis, wealth, time, and health, and ultimately we get the result as you explained in the example. You never know when is the time you go off. So better to start as early as possible, and to better anything good for your own self, but for your own soul is the way how Prabhupada has established this institution. So be a part of the institution, and then the process will start. So don't run after health, wealth, and time. Just run after this process. That is the actual food for our soul. Everything else is the food for the outer covering that won't last for long. That is a certain time. As the time switch is off, everything is finished. So better to start as early as possible to give food to the inner soul, which is hankering for our
and that Prahlad Maharaj, he's saying like that, isn't it? All these great personalities, the four Kumars, Prahlad Maharaj is saying, Komaramavich, like that, from the very beginning of life, from the tender age of childhood, one should engage in these activities of devotion. So it can be taken up at any time. And yeah, that is a real self-interest, and it's not selfish. That's again that point. If we pursue, people will say that, oh, we're doing something, and you, Hare Krishna people, are you're after your own selfish interest. You want to save your soul, and it's all about you. But no, it's not. It's self-interest is completely different from selfish interest. So the devotee pursuing their own self-interest is beneficial for everyone. If we pursue Krishna consciousness, it is beneficial for ourselves and for our family, for our relatives, for the whole world. There'll be harmony in the world. And if everyone pursues their real self-interest, there'll be the kingdom of God on earth like that. So it's not selfish. It's yeah.
So yeah, that is the understanding.
I'm sorry, Prabhu.
There's a people, even though they know, but they don't try to understand. That's the switching point. They know, but they don't try to understand, because the whole curtain of ignorance is being put in between, so they don't try to. And that what's
so we have to become like the electrician go around and by a little bit of knowledge, somehow by a little bit of kindness, maybe devotee can be kind to others and show that. Sometimes we can give a little prasadam. Somehow we can create good fortune for others. That's yeah.
So that is the
So
mission.
is there any other? Just in case, I have no idea. As again, I'm not great at this technology. I can't see if anybody else is there or anybody else is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Chaitanya Prabhu.
Thank you, Hari Krishna.
So, okay, maybe we'll finish at that point.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for the very nice classes. It appears there's no one else to have any other reflection.
That's fine.
Thank you once again for your very nice class. It is always full of informations and bringing in the key points so nicely that at the end of the class we can always we have a lot to take. Thank you once again for your class, Prabhuji.
Okay, and please forgive me for the beginning. The technology was all over the place, so my humble apologies. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
कृपा सिन्धुभो एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। हिज ग्रेस जय शिला प्रभु की जय। शिला प्रभुपाद की जय। गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल
Prabhupada
की जय। All praise to assembled devotees. Hari Hari Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.